Welcome to Girl on the Gov, the podcast,
where our goal is to make politics more accessible and less intimidating.
The show features an interview with an expert in the political field, walking us through the many cues we have about politics, civics, government, and more.
By providing civic education in the places we are, on our phones, and in the language we speak. And yes, we know we say like a lot.
It's kind of the point, because politics needed a rebrand. Welcome back to Girl on the Gov, the podcast. Happy Thanksgiving week. It is the holidays, I guess.
Wild. I feel like, look, it's a classic, like, every year thing to be like, I can't believe it's this time already. Like, I feel like that could be, like, any holiday. Like,
and we're, like, broken
Easter.
records about that shit. About time. We're like, I can't believe it's this time of year. We're literally a broken record. We know that, guys. That's
we're
fine.
So sorry. Like, if we're going to apologize for something, it's going to be that. But 100%. I will say that
Nothing
it doesn't... We're very much kidding, including our inability to say anything, any sentence that doesn't start with "let's talk about," because we may have hit a world record. On our episode with Brian recently, we were doing a recap of the election, which is honestly such a evergreen, timeless episode, which I know seems sort of counterproductive, or not counterproductive, it's not a word, like counterintuitive. I'm not sure the word, something.
But I do understand where you're coming from, where it's like, especially for these next few months, especially until people are like sworn in, it is evergreen in the sense that like it will give you an understanding of what all these results mean until I think it's January 3rd when everyone gets sworn in, and how these power dynamics will shift and what it means for the Democrats, what it means for the Republicans. Like, he breaks it all down. So yeah.
Which I honestly think is such a good episode to listen to coming home for a holiday, or like leaving, like you have these long road trips, or, oh my God, my friends have had some of the worst flight situations recently, like genuinely like hell on earth scenarios.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. Like, I'm so glad that I don't have to fly for any holiday, but just like, regardless, obviously wishing everyone a safe travel season, and also hopefully an expedient one where you don't get stuck in crazy layovers, et cetera, or canceled flights. But if you do, look, prepare for the worst and hope for the best. And in that case, that means download every episode of Girl on the Gov, the podcast, and catch up. So that is a great one to do the catch up on. And also, like, if you're having conversations around whatever holiday table you're, hanging at, honestly, it's a good one to have like the fun facts ready from.
100%, because we wanted to talk about for a second like Thanksgiving tips and just holiday tips in general when you go and see your family. And sometimes, whether it's your immediate family or your aunts, uncles, cousins, like whoever you usually spend these holidays with, like sometimes there are family members that don't agree with you politically, and political conversations come up. And that happens to my family every time we see certain members of the family. I won't be spending holidays with them, but like when we do see them and spend time with them, like politics always comes up, and it's always such a contentious time usually, especially if you're on different sides of the spectrum. And I think there are tips on how to navigate those situations. I think my number one tip is to really just not have those conversations or not get involved, like as hard as that is. Like, if your dad and your uncle on opposite sides like start getting into it, like I personally just like walk away and like leave the room, just like this isn't how I want to spend my time or energy. But obviously, like, there are moments when that isn't always an option or isn't always make sense. So speaking of Brian Derrick is releasing a Thanksgiving cheat sheet. So go follow him on Instagram and get ready for that. I don't think he has let it or released it yet, but he announced that he is working on it. So it'll be a little cheat sheet of like just like some fun, easy facts to like keep in the noggin for when these conversations come up, and specifically when there might be some like misinformation thrown at you or some false facts, false news that's just like not the information that is accurate. Brian is providing talking points on how to navigate those types of conversations, and sometimes the misinformation and such that unfortunately divide us. So keep an eye out for that.
Totally. And I think a few things to remember is the yes and of it all. This is more of like something that I feel like is taught in like every like team building exercise at any corporate company. But you can literally say in a conversation, yes, I hear you. Let's table this. Or yes, I hear you. Let me think about that and get back to you. You can always table the conversation. So you can acknowledge the person that you disagree with's belief, and then you can provide them sort of that next step that moves you away from that conversation. And that's just more than anything, if you're looking for a way to de-escalate something, especially if someone's coming in hot and loaded, that is a good way to do it. Obviously, every situation is different, can't solve for them all.
Mm-hmm. I feel like on that too is something where you can be like, well, I like don't agree with that. And like the yes and like Sam said, and like something, especially in politics, that I feel like is a good little like one-liner to say is like, I can't really do this subject justice, or I can't explain this and really give it the justice that it needs, or like this issue, I can't explain it like the way, say, this person who went on this podcast did. You want to listen to it one time? Go ahead. So like, I think that's another good thing to just like divert. Also like put it out there that it's okay to not be able to fully explain sometimes like how you feel about an issue, or be able to regurgitate all these political talking points and facts to like be like, you know what, I actually like can't really explain it properly, but like here you go, here's like this thing that like I thought really explained it well and like did it justice that maybe you can listen to one time. Like I think always kind of like changing the subject and doing the yes and then providing some type of resource. Maybe my mom always suggests Ground News, the app, where when the news, the like where they get their news conversation, like where did you hear that, and they say like fucking Breitbart or like some bullshit like publication, my mom's like, well, like there's actually this app called Ground News, and it tells you where your news is leaning, just so you can get an understanding of like the bias within like the information you're consuming. So like having kind of some stuff on like resources on deck, I think is also a great way to just kind of like de-escalate.
I agree. And I also agree with the fact that Ground News should sponsor us at this point, because
Jesus Christ.
Oh my God. Besides that, we do love using it. We have literally shouted out this resource on every single podcast interview I think we've ever done. Yeah. So, I mean, look, it feels like what would be a happy marriage, if I'm going to bless a marriage. But anyways, Ground News, we know you follow us. We don't know if you listen to us, but we would love to partner. So just gonna
maybe we'll slide
shamelessly but they left us on read. On red. Is this gonna be the great debate?
Samantha, there is no debate here. It's left on red. That was like, ask anyone in society.
Left on read.
Oh my God. No. Put that on our Instagram story like right now and get a poll going, because I don't think I've heard anybody say left on read.
Is this a West Coast thing?
Oh my God. No, this is just a life thing.
No
I swear.
Way.
I swear. I swear.
Wait, should we do this?
Sound
should we
off.
Put this live? Wait,
sound off in our DMs.
So yeah, let us know.
The story is posted. Go sound off in the poll, and we'll settle this.
If you catch this in the morning, you're a morning listener, you get the chance to participate in the Instagram poll. And if you miss it,
just slide into our
DMs.
Or comment on like our episode post or something. We'll find it. We'll find your answer.
I thought some more time. Now I feel like I'm changing my answer. Now I feel like it's red too.
Oh, here it is.
I'm going to have to honestly, randomly bring something up like this in like a week and see what my just organic reaction is. I wonder if it changes.
Okay.
She doesn't believe me. It's fine.
But first of all, yesterday we released top stories. Go listen if you have not yet. We talk about the shooting in Colorado, Trump's re-election bid, and the new Democrat and GOP House leadership and what that's going to look like in the future. So go listen. But one story that happened over the weekend that we did not talk about, that me and Sam have been itching to talk about, is the Biden wedding at the White House. That was stunning.
Beyond.
Stunning.
I have no notes, no edits, nothing. Absolutely stunning. The Vogue pictures in full came out today. The cover, everything.
I know. I need to see those.
Oh my God. Literally I just don't even know which part to start at. First of all, both dresses, absolutely epitome of elegance, so stunning.
Mhm.
Then on top of it, the veil, the image of the veil
Oh my
coming
God, these
down 2
pictures.
stories over the front of the White House,
Wait, I'm looking at the Vogue pictures for the first time.
insane.
The cover with Jill.
And Jill
Stop.
looks, Jill's gorgeous. Of course,
I want to
she's
cry.
gorgeous.
I got goosebumps from this picture. That is the cutest thing I've ever seen.
Obsessed.
And do we know the history of people who have gotten married in the White House?
I've read it like 10 times and none of it has stuck.
Mm.
But I do know that the Biden family paid for the wedding. It does not come from tax dollars.
That was a question I had because I was like going to the comments on some of the pictures and I was like, how many times are people going to say, are we paying for this?
Yep, 1,000%. I knew it was going to, but no, they did not use Americans' tax dollars. The Biden family paid for it themselves. So just FYI on that, I can see that definitely be a Thanksgiving talking point. 1,000%. But there is a history
the second
of
dress with the gloves. I'm
stunning.
on the floor.
Like, it's also, even especially like the first dress, which is apparently like a custom Ralph Lauren. It's stunning.
Here it
I could
is.
never pull it off in my life. Not that I need
White
to pull
House weddings
but
history.
okay, give us the tape. I have a book.
Continue reading for free. Well, I don't have a Vogue account, but it looks as though there have been some weddings. Linda Bird Johnson assists husband, Marine Captain Charles Robbins, used a sword to cut piece of wedding cake during reception while the president and Mrs. Johnson look on. So Lyndon Johnson's daughter got married at the White House.
Yeah. I think there were a handful of daughters. I think there's something new about the granddaughter element. And then there? There is a president that, what was his name? He was problematic. They're all problematic. And he married like his best friend's daughter and like had taken care of her as like a little kid. And then she was like, quote unquote, of age and married her at the White House. Who the hell? Oh, it's going to drive me nuts. I will figure it out at some point. Something interesting, though, is that Naomi and husband Neil. Husband. We're just going to leave it at that. I guess they live in the White House residence. And I didn't realize that family members could live there. It kind of feels like a Royals thing. Like, you know how the Royals like have the royal residences and it's like that. Like, it was giving that energy to me.
Yeah.
Like not in a...
I would do that. I feel like it's like a once in a lifetime opportunity and I would really like capitalize on that. What?
Do you remember that movie from when we were kids? And it was like the first daughter and she like, I think she doesn't like run away, but she like sneaks out and like goes on a date.
Yeah.
And what movie was that? And it was...
I think it was called First Daughter.
Oh, wait, I totally want to rewatch that.
Who is in it?
Couldn't tell you.
Yeah, it's called First Daughter with Katie Holmes.
Stop. It was Katie Holmes?
Yeah.
Crazy. Okay,
Michael Keaton was, of course, the president.
That feels
so on brand.
Yeah.
No, super stunning. And I actually like just was kind of shocked by it because I didn't really know what was happening. And then I was like, oh my God, this is beautiful. And then I was like, had the thoughts, who else has done this at the White House? Like, is this normal or is Fox News going to tear their asses apart?
Well, they could literally be doing the most selfless, amazing thing in the world and Fox News would find an issue with it. So it just doesn't even matter. But I think it is interesting that we had Tiffany Trump's wedding.
I was just going to ask you, what did you think about hers?
Not my style at all.
Yeah.
But honestly, not as...
We also didn't talk about like really how Trump married off his daughter the same weekend when like basically most of the election results came in and he had his ass whooped.
Yeah, that couldn't have been a fun, not a fun wedding to be at, but like a fun...
But just especially given his like ego and you know how probably pissed off he was. Like, I mean, I kind of feel bad for Tiffany.
I feel like I always feel badly for Tiffany.
Not my style.
However, Naomi Biden's.
Oh
absolutely
my God. Absolutely stunning,
and
timeless.
More my
beautiful
style. Like that is just like, it's every element of it is just elevated elegance.
I really liked the
and
second dress.
timelessness.
Like that's definitely my
Yeah.
style. The first dress
Totally.
was like very like traditional, like modest.
Looks stunning on her.
Yeah. I don't
would
think
look
I
like
would
I
go
would be
that like
choked.
modest traditional, but given like you're getting married at the White House, so like you got to keep it classy. Not that like my wedding dress would be whorish or anything, but it's just no. I was really blown away by how beautiful and just like the photography,
Stunning.
the way they set everything up was really, really beautiful.
Also felt like intimate from the pictures
It
released.
did.
Like it felt,
Didn't look
as
like
opposed to
that
on
many people.
contrast to, I would say, Tiffany's, is it really like gave the idea of like this is a small family
wedding.
and friends like gathering. And who knows what the restraints are? I don't know. I've never planned a wedding at the White House. I don't know if it's like you're only allowed a certain amount or security requires XYZ. Like who knows what the
Should we see if we can schedule a White House tour? We're going to DC, you guys, I think.
Wait, no, legit though.
We should.
I've never been. I mean, I've been to DC, but
I've never been in the White House either.
You know, our 8th grade trip did not include that.
Okay, well, we'll think about it. We have a DC trip being planned.
Yeah, what she said.
But let's get into this episode and introduce our guest because we have been rambling on for quite a minute now.
Yeah, and we're just like, I don't know, I'm in like a chatty Cathy mood. So like if someone doesn't stop me, it's really all bets are off.
That's my job.
Anyways, yeah, that's Maddie's title on LinkedIn. Co-CEO, Girl on the Gov, co-host, Girl on the Gov, the podcast, Sam's handler.
Mouthpiece handler. 100%. That's literally comes with the territory here, Girl on the Gov. One day your assistant is going to have to be that. They're going to have to be like, Samantha, shut your mouth.
It's going to be like a changing of the guard too. Like we're going to like hire that person and it's going to be like orientation. And you're going to be like, I have suffered.
I'm passing the baton to you, young grasshopper. This is how you deal with this mouth of Samantha's. Let me teach you, because I'm done. I'm screaming. Okay. Let's introduce our guest.
Hold on. Let me get my voice down to a normal octave. So this week's episode, we are talking about climate. We're talking about clean jobs. We are talking about clean infrastructure. We are talking about the EPA, which, you know, we love to define like a fun little term moment. So obviously we get into that. And our guest is, drumroll please, Jason Walsh. He is the executive director of the BlueGreen Alliance. So without further ado, here is Jason. Can you tell us a little bit about what you guys do? What's the mission behind the organization here?
Sure. Well, let me give a little backstory. So we were founded a little over 15 years ago by the Sierra Club, which is the nation's largest environmental organization, and the Steelworkers Union, which is the nation's biggest industrial union. Two very odd bedfellows who came together based on a shared belief that as a country, we shouldn't have to choose between good jobs and a clean environment. And everything we have done since our founding in 2006 really tries to achieve that principle, right? So we work first and foremost on public policy at the federal level and in a number of different states and to a certain extent internationally. And we really focus in on policy solutions that protect the environment while creating high quality, family supporting jobs and a vibrant, inclusive economy. We're now 7 national and international labor unions and 6 national environmental groups who collectively represent about 15 million Americans.
It's awesome. Well, you make a good point of 2 groups that you would not expect coming together. Can you talk about how there actually kind of is like a natural cohesion between those 2 groups, Sierra Club and Steelworkers there?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it starts with, and here I'll just answer it, on behalf of like all of the partners, right? What keeps them all together, right? I think it starts with the fact that actually these are both labor unions and environmental groups are both public interest groups, right? They certainly represent the interests of their members and supporters, right? Separately, but clean air, clean water, good jobs. I mean, these are public benefits as well. They're benefits to the society as a whole. I I think that's a real bond between these organizations. I think it's also true that often they share the same opponents, right? It is, corporations who want to screw over workers and pollute the environment and who have too much power and ability to do so. It is politicians who sometimes echo exactly what certain corporations want or just have a philosophical difference with government acting on behalf of communities and workers. So that's bonding as well.
Yeah, totally. And what has traditionally been the relationship between like labor unions and climate activists and such? Is there any like kind of notable moments, I guess, in history where the two have come together and just taken on this issue as two groups?
I think one notable date was 1999, which I'm not going to ask how old you both are, but but that was a while ago, right? 23 years ago, and that was the battle for Seattle, right? It was when a bunch of environmental activists and labor activists got in the street in Seattle and fought for a vision of trade policy that respected both the environment and workers, right? And so the frame at that point in 1999 wasn't so climate forward, but it had a lot of those people in the streets, right? Sometimes you hear the term Teamsters and Turtles, right? There were Teamsters members there and environmentalists dressed up as turtles. Another day, yeah.
Love the visual.
It was pretty wild. Another date is 2006 when the BlueGreen Alliance formed. I mean, I think we've been around long enough to count as being a tradition. I mean, another date, 2011, just to be transparent, was when the Keystone XL pipeline was blocked by the Obama administration. That was an enormous tension point. Mm-hmm. Between our labor partners and our environmental partners. It really put stress on our coalition. So I want to be just totally candid, right? Like it's not always about unity. It is focusing on what unites us and then dealing with the divisive issues.
Right.
And there still are divisive issues that we work through.
Mm-hmm. Totally. And are there any that, sort of are top of mind or any that are like, these are the top two things that we get into tussles about, can't ignore them?
I mean, any inner effort that is sort of framed around like, sometimes you hear keep fossil fuels in the ground, right? Or blocking existing or proposed infrastructure projects if they have some connection to the fossil economy. First of all, let me just say I totally understand that campaigns, those campaigns, many of my environmental partners, help lead them, participate in them. But that kind of framing, at least in my experience, I've often found puts the workers who are working on those projects or in those facilities or in those sectors on the defensive. They feel like they're under attack. Sometimes they feel like their identity is under attack, not just their job. And we have found in any state, any part of the country where those fights proliferate, it really toxifies the relationship between environmental groups and labor unions, which is too bad because, our theory of the case is that there's a much more that unites us than divides us.
Totally. Well, speaking of uniting, can you shed light on Solidarity for Climate Action and what that really entails?
Yeah. So Solidarity for Climate Action is a platform that the BlueGreen Alliance released in 2019, summer of 2019. And it starts with a vision that we are faced with a climate crisis, but that's not the only crisis we're facing. We are also facing a crisis of income inequality that is grounded in economic and racial injustice. And that the solutions that we pursue to both of those crises have to be just as intersecting as their causes. And the platform, I've actually got a copy here, right? I mean, that actually wasn't a prop. I actually have one on my desk.
Show and tell on the show is always welcome.
Yeah.
And so we have a list of policy ideas, starting with a goal of having a net zero emissions economy by 2050, which is a big deal. Yeah. I mean, this platform was the first time that unions like the steelworkers, which, to be clear, represent most of the country's oil refinery workers, right? Or the plumbers and pipe fitters, right? They work on a ton of pipelines. First time they'd ever put their name on a document that calls for that, right?
Yeah, wow.
And they did it because the platform pays just as much attention to all the stuff we need to build to get there, and the quality of jobs that we need to create, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not acceptable to create a bunch of solar and wind jobs that don't pay family sustaining wages, right? It's not acceptable to trade jobs in the fossil sector that, for all their pollution, over many years have been developed, often by the unions in those sectors, into good family supporting jobs. Not okay to trade those for jobs that have less security, lower wages, and fewer benefits, and where workers don't have a voice on the job. So that's a little bit of background on the Solidarity for Climate Action platform. I will say that we put it out at a pretty great time. And first of all, just to illustrate the joys of working in coalition, that went through 21 drafts, right? It took 8 months to develop, a relatively short document, because it's hard.
Yeah.
Most important things are hard. This was hard, but I think it's a testament to the trust that our partners had built up over a bunch of years through good times and bad, that they were able to stay at it and stay at the table, which really means something. And I think all the more important because you see a lot of documents come out of coalitions that are kind of lowest common denominator document. Is what is the most vanilla platform that everyone can agree to, because it's really not all that ambitious. This is pretty ambitious. This made our partners, our labor and environmental partners, uncomfortable in different ways. It stretched them in different ways. Yeah. And the timing was good because, of course, literally we released it June of 2019, the first, and then we did some education with it, right? And the first presidential campaign we brought it to was the Biden campaign, which just started at that point. And based on our work and the work of a whole lot of others, I like to think that we really helped to shape President Biden's very explicit linking of climate action with union jobs, which we are, with that platform as kind of our foundation, we have been working to achieve in the first 2 years of his administration and in this Congress.
Yeah. Totally. Well, I can definitely relate to the 22 plus revision situation. One, because usually that is us, but also there is an ad on the subway right now. Forgetting the brand, so sorry, it's not going to be an ad for them, but they talk about how many versions things go to and what they're saved as, and it's final _final, no really final, third round, and I'm yep,
yeah,
you can't keep track of which one
is this the most recent one? No,
it's so
the
hard.
Last one said final. Which one's the final?
The struggle. But nonetheless, that aside, we do want to get into I have a stupid question but segment. And it kind of tags into what you were saying of there's much to build as we try and move towards a, more green industry and whatnot. So we want to ask, what is clean infrastructure?
Clean infrastructure is, if I wrote this out, it would be more coherent. So bear with me. Clean infrastructure is infrastructure that enables us individually and as a society to reduce pollution. Is the shortest version, pithiest version of that definition I can offer right now off the cuff.
What is that like? What does that look like if you were to think about?
It looks like a lot of different things in a lot of different sectors. And I'm glad you asked the question because it's often defined too narrowly, right? So it's not just installing solar panels or wind turbines. It is also putting a high efficiency HVAC system into a building, or making the steel that goes into the foundation for the utility scale solar array. It's a lot of jobs across the value chain, across the economy. It also includes jobs cleaning up all of the big messes that we have made in this country, which unfortunately are almost too many to count. And so whether that's cleaning up brownfields or abandoned mine lands, all of those, I would argue, are clean jobs.
There it is. Clean jobs.
Well, speaking of clean jobs and messes and all the things coming together, what is OSHA?
OSHA. OSHA stands for the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, which is located within the Department of Labor. It was created by the Occupational Safety and Health Act. And most fundamentally, it is about ensuring that workplaces in this country are safe and healthy for workers. And they do that through regulation. They do it through training and education, a bunch of different needs. But most fundamentally, that's what OSHA is.
Mm-hmm. And what is the Toxic Substances Control Act?
Otherwise known as TSCA, which is a law that was passed in the mid-1970s, 1976, I think, and updated a few years ago. And it provides the Environmental Protection Agency with the authority to regulate a pretty broad range of toxic substances and chemicals that go into all of the everyday products that we use and don't have nearly enough understanding of what they do.
Gotcha. All right. Wow. What is the green chemistry market?
Oh, green chemistry, I think, is most fundamentally about designing chemicals and chemical processes and chemical products that avoid the creation of toxics and waste.
You're killing our, definition roundup here, but let's bring it home.
I'm trying.
Bring it home with what is the EPA?
Oh, I mean, the EPA was created by Congress in 1970. I don't think there was a single dissenting vote, which tells you a little bit about the devolution of the Republican Party over the last 50 years. But EPA is all about, they are charged with protecting human and environmental health and well-being, often through regulation, but not only that.
I have a question too. You said earlier that you presented the Solidarity for Climate Action. That's what you presented to the Biden campaign, right? Or what was it? Yeah. Did you present that with other campaigns? Just curious. I worked on Tom Sayer's campaign. That was like just the idea of like clean jobs and a clean economy was like his entire campaign platform. I'm curious.
Yeah. Worked with him. I did actually. I was not the executive director at the time. I was working as a consultant at BGA, but I was part of the group of partners who presented the platform to folks from the Biden campaign. We shared it. I think I don't have a list off the top of my head, so I don't know if we talked with Tom's campaign about it. Mm-hmm. But I would say we shared it and talked it through with most of the candidates, the major candidates.
Yeah. And can you kind of also highlight just how that process works of how like an organization like BlueGreen Alliance comes in during the campaign times, the electoral times, and works with campaigns versus when, say the Biden administration gets into office, when do they bring you back and say, hey, like, we want to set up this platform? Like, how does that all work from campaign into office when you work with candidates?
It's a good question. The answer is complicated, as you know. I mean, first of all, we were educating the Biden campaign and other campaigns as a 501c3, as a nonprofit, right? We were, and nonprofits can do that as long as they're providing that education to any candidate, right? So we offered it to the Trump campaign. Shockingly, they were not interested in talking about it.
Shocks you even offered
yes,
it.
I mean, we were all devastated and surprised by it. But and then I mean, for several months we were just mostly in education mode with, and then we also did that with members of Congress as well. That changed and we became much more punctilious about legality because when we got into 2020, we started a process that resulted in the BlueGreen Alliance actually endorsing then Vice President Biden to be president. And we had never made an endorsement before as a coalition. And obviously in that scenario, there are certain rules, right? You can't coordinate with the campaign or do anything like that. But we do have a C4, right, which allows us to make endorsements. And so we did it. We were very careful about it. But then the campaign, uncoordinated with us, used that endorsement as honestly we had hoped to talk about how, this candidate and their platform had united, the labor and environmental movements, which obviously is is an important thing to be able to say on the campaign.
Mm-hmm.
And so I like to think that put us in a very good position with the Biden administration during the transition period, where we were also talking with the transition team about different policy ideas. And then at that point, just to complete answer your question, we got into full policy wonk mode, right, where we were going into like very detailed. And just to give you an example, even back during the transition period, right? So this is between November 2020 and
January,
kind of a fraught time. One of the policies we were pitching was called Buy Clean, which is a way of using government procurement, to incentivize clean, domestically made products that go into infrastructure projects, like cleaner steel and aluminum and concrete and those kind of things. And we first passed that law with our allies in California in 2017. And we've been working on it in a few other states, and we basically pitched it to the Biden administration as something that they should implement at the federal level. And so fast forward to December of 2021, the president put out an executive order on federal sustainability, and a Buy Clean initiative was a part of that executive order. So that's just an example of, right, sort of going from the sort of ideation and honestly pitching policy ideas phase, right, to actually seeing it become effectively the law of the land.
Well, I'm glad I have more questions just about that administration and where you guys are at with some of these policy ideas and how they're coming, but you answered some of that. But first, we'll kind of get back into what all of this really means and talk about like these end goals that we're looking at. So like, how do we go about creating sustainable long-term career opportunities or jobs in clean manufacturing or the energy industry, and like how does policy come about to achieve that?
Yeah. So I have a multi-layered answer to that question. So let me give it a shot. I think let's first of all just start big picture with a recognition that the majority of these, sometimes they're called green jobs or clean energy jobs or sustainable jobs, right? The majority of these jobs are blue collar jobs that don't require a 4-year college education. The biggest sectors where you see the most job creation are construction and manufacturing, and then it kind of flows from there. Now, I think this is a good thing. We think this is a good thing because literally every labor market trend of the last several decades has worked against blue collar workers and workers with less formal education and training. And here we have this imperative, right, of having to rebuild and repair and retrofit and refuel our entire economy that will create lots and lots of blue collar jobs and hopefully do so in a way that will make them quality union jobs. That's enormously powerful as a way of sort of pushing back on all of the trends that have driven down wages and benefits and working conditions in these sectors. So that's just one thing to note. I think we also need to add to that an understanding that there are some new skills and new occupations with these jobs and that are created in this transition. But for the most part, we're looking at existing skills and existing occupations. They're just being deployed for new economic activity or to deliver new fuels or technologies, right? The building trades worker who installs a utility scale solar farm is the same worker with largely the same set of skills who builds a combined cycle natural gas power plant, right? And so you can kind of flow from there. The third piece I would emphasize is we need to proactively work on inclusion as we do these, as we create these jobs, right? The two sectors I gave as examples, construction and manufacturing, women are dramatically underrepresented in both of those sectors. Black Americans are underrepresented in both of those sectors. So in addition to paying really close attention to job quality, and there are a bunch of different ways to do that, which we can talk about.
Totally. And thinking about this approach and this initiative and this whole dynamic, I feel like there's been, at least in my bubble that I live in, a lot of pushback on the idea of creating clean jobs and sort of evolving these industries. Is there a reason for that? Like, what's sort of the backstory? Like, who's saying, and then now I don't want this?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think there's authentic pushback and inauthentic pushback, right? There are the authentic pushback. I think is people who hear people talk about clean jobs as if it's an entirely different set of occupations and jobs that make their current jobs irrelevant, right? Which I think kind of gets their hackles up for I think some good reasons. The inauthentic pushback is people who actually don't give a damn about clean at all, right? And don't want clean. Many of them are from industries that are inherently dirty and dangerous. And the putting a brand out there with clean in it, they either want to co-opt that brand or they want to blow it up.
Yeah. On like the flip side too, can you kind of show how, clean jobs in an economy would put us in the right direction? And also if there's any like places where regionally this would have maybe like a more positive impact or like would be particularly more impactful, if that makes sense.
I think it does. I mean, the case we make is that they're just, it is climate change is real, right? There are things we have to do as a country, and at the core of it is moving toward an economy in which we are not emitting lots and lots of greenhouse gases, right? And so if we accept that as a reality, not everybody does, but if we accept that as a reality, we need to gear our economy and the jobs in it towards creating those clean outcomes. And how we do it matters. The quality of the jobs matter. The accessibility of those jobs matter. But it's also pretty damn exciting, right? I mean, done the right way, it's not only preserving a livable planet that we can all live on, it's also trying to reimagine the kind of society we want, right? Like better jobs,
right?
More representation, more equity. So we've got, it is a crisis, certainly multiple crises, but it's also kind of an enormous opportunity to do some things differently and better.
Absolutely. Yeah. And okay, so let's go back to the Biden administration and Congress, honestly, because I know we've talked about how you guys do work with campaigns in the transition period and then ultimately when they get into office. Let's start with the Biden administration. Where is the Biden administration at? You did mention one executive order, but can you kind of highlight, the work that you've done with the Biden administration and what's kind of has come to fruition at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I gave you that Buy Clean example, but I can honestly say that this is, an administration that, first of all, and certainly in my lifetime, I have not worked with an administration or for an administration that was as unapologetically pro-labor. And that has really mattered for our coalition and for the labor movement more broadly. And that is embodied in a whole bunch of different ways, sometimes in executive action, right? Like, so, the president put out an executive order requiring federal agencies to enter into project labor agreements on projects over a certain size. And project labor agreements, that's another rabbit hole, but basically it lays out the working conditions, training requirements, career pipelines into all of the work that gets done on these major projects. And you don't have to be a union to do it, but it's typically unions who do that work because they're geared to do that. But we also in this administration see how that gets translated in terms of the legislative proposals and priorities they fight for. Now, the caveat there is that we haven't won everything that we have fought for. It is pretty hard to do when you need every single Democratic vote in the Senate and can only spare a couple in the House. So as you and all of your listeners, I'm sure, are well aware, the Build Back Better Act, which we strongly supported and really worked the details on, that passed the House in the latter part of last year, kind of crashed and burned at the end of 2021 in dramatic fashion.
Absolutely. Well, to wrap everything up, where can people find Blue Green Alliance? Where can they get involved? Can you kind of highlight some of that stuff? Social media?
Yeah, I mean, go to our website. That's probably the best way to do that, bluegreenalliance.org. And there's a lot of information and ways of signing up to get our alerts and our newsletters and all of that jazz. But also, I would say look for in your own communities ways in which you yourself or any group you volunteer for or represent can make connections, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't have to be environmental group to labor union, although that's who we are. But I've worked pretty much my whole career trying to organize coalitions that fight for progressive policy change. And it's really important to do that. It's really hard to get any change in this country by yourself, right? Or with your own organization. It is much more powerful to do it in coalition. And, you have to go into it eyes wide open. Like, coalition work is hard. Honestly, it's an enormous pain in the ass a lot of the time, but it is also worth it, right? Because what you can do together is so much more than you can do apart.
Absolutely. Love that. What a great closing note. Well, thank you so much for coming on and giving us all this info. We need it. So thank you.
Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.